Okay, we should be going live across LinkedIn and in exclusive members only Facebook group, The Leading Man. So guys that are tuning in, watching live, let us know if you're watching live. Just put like a hashtag live below. Also, if you're catching this on replay, just let us know as well with a hashtag replay below so we can see who's actually tuning in. So I'm joined by today. I've now got to say, like a sort of ex-client, because you just working up just over 9 months working with us, Tom. So, dudes, do you want to just intro yourself a little bit about who you are? You know, the job that you do. You know, how we came to meet. You know, any sort of like relevant context.
Sure. Tom Middlestead, nice to meet everybody. Thanks for having me, Alex. My background is I grew up in the laboratory world, so I work in a lab diagnostics industry. I was a technical guy for a long time, spent some time in the military, and now work more on the business side. How Alex and I got connected was basically just through LinkedIn. Just I can't even remember exactly how it happened. I think something popped up, and either you connected with me or I did something and jumped on. And I guess part of my journey for all of this was for years and years, I thought I was in pretty good shape, and actually had some back issues for a while. After I got out of the military, I gained some weight, and I think that happens with a lot of people, where you're used to, having a crowd that you're with, and you get taped and weighed and all this other stuff. You always have some fitness stuff that's going on, and then you settle into the business world, and you go out to eat. You maybe don't exercise as much, and my weight got a lot higher than I'd like, and I kept working to get it down. And I guess what kind of brought me to Alex is I finally just decided I've done all I can do. I think I probably could have pushed a little harder, I guess, but it just seemed like I was doing all these things and felt like I needed to have some outside accountability. So I looked at the program. Alex and I had a little bit of back and forth on this, and I finally decided, I'm going to make an investment in this. And it was, kind of during the pandemic and all. And I just thought, what, I've got to just get somebody that's going to hold me accountable. And after talking to Alex, it was, I think I felt like, all right, so this is a guy that's just going to make sure that every time I show up, there's going to be some level of accountability from our last conversation. And that was kind of my hope. And certainly that was the case. And, we worked week over week over week, just working through that. And it really did a lot to ensure that I was measuring for results, that I was showing up the way that I should show up, when I should show up, that I was doing what I was going to do, or doing what I was told to do. And at some point, it was just one of these situations where I kept on, waiting for some results. And then the next thing you know, the weight started coming off, the fitness started coming up, and at the end of it, I think I was about 20 pounds less. I was doing more pull-ups than I could have when I was in the best shape that I was. And but yeah, that's kind of how the whole process worked, and worked really well.
Awesome, man. You got some pretty cool results when you did reignite, right? And it's the 3 months that we spent together. I think there was a point you mentioned before we actually started work together, where you've been in the military, as you said. You knew about health and fitness. You knew how to get in shape, but actually your job, traveling across multiple different time zones, presented like a whole host of unique challenges. What do you remember? Like, if you cast your mind back to before we actually started work together, what was the point at which you're like, I need to get help with this. I need to kind of get out of my own way and just say, look, if I want to get to where I want to get to, and I want to stay there, like, I need some outside intervention. Do you remember what that sort of pivotal moment was?
When was it? It was shortly after the new year, and I looked at my weight, and I thought, what, I can keep pushing. And I remember it probably was around the February, Marchish timeframe. And I mean, everybody makes New Year's resolutions. I finally just put my foot down and said, all right, New Year's resolution stuff is done. I'm done making promises to myself. And my weight was kind of up in the upper 190s. And, I kept kind of pushing down to like 192, and I just, it was right around that time frame. I finally decided I just can't break that barrier. I don't know what it is. And so it was right around that time frame. I just somehow came to the decision. I looked at the program and I thought, it's a little pricey for something online. I'd actually reached out to my sister and had a conversation with her, and because I was looking for two things. One, I wanted the fitness piece. I was looking for kind of the holistic, somebody that could kind of coach me through some challenges as well. And then I thought, because I was even looking for like a nutritionist here. I wanted somebody that's going to say, okay, look at your food and look at what you're eating and the choices that you're making. And so I was hoping for somebody to have somebody that could kind of look at those three things with me. And it was right in that time frame. I finally just decided, I'm just going to do this. I said it's a little more than I'd like to spend on this, but I thought, part of it for me was just, all right, if I'm going to make this kind of investment, then I'm damn well going to make sure that I follow through on the program all the way through and just see what happens. And so that's kind of how I came to the decision. And then just something just clicked one day and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I remember kind of hitting the send button on the, like, all right, there goes the money. Boom.
That's it. It's like you decide, don't they, right? It's like there's an investment in yourself to make, and it's quite often the hardest piece.
Right.
But again, if you cast your mind back, like outside of just the health and fitness, if we take, the broader, more holistic approach of looking at not just physical health, but mental, emotional health, which is, that's kind of the what I would call sort of modern day performance. When those three things are actually moving in the right direction, we tend to be the best version of ourselves. We tend to get more out of ourselves, whether that means performing better at work, whether it means balancing, our competing commitments at work and showing up with our families, like whatever it is for you that you determine as performance. Like, how was it affecting you before? So, you weren't where you want to be physically, you were up in like 190, but how was that affecting you, mentally, emotionally? Like, was it causing you any issues that you had to contend with at all?
I think more than anything, and just trying to be fit and make better choices and probably even sleep better, because I remember we were even talking about sleep patterns during this whole thing, how that affects your fitness, and getting good sleep definitely affects how you show up the next day. And that I'd say, if anything else, I wanted to be kind of more on my game. I was looking, okay, where do I want to go with my career? And there's a broad spectrum of people that I work with, and I felt like I wanted to just show up better, show up more mentally fit as well as physically fit. And to do that, we kind of had to look at, okay, how do you ensure that you're looking at things with the least amount of anxiety, least amount of stress? And the way to do that is, if you can get in good physical shape and you can get you get good sleep, then all those things kind of help you show up better the next day. And you kind of have to do it consistently. Anybody can do it like for a day or two, but you got to have kind of built-in habits to ensure that whatever you do is sustainable. So I think one of the things that we did, kind of just to make sure that I was showing up the best that I could each day, not just physically, but kind of mentally and being sharp, was just ensuring that we were looking at things like sleep patterns, and then maybe talking through challenges that come up, whether it's work or, outside of work. And then how do you frame them in a way that you're able to just, if you go down that negative path, like some of the YouTubes you sent my way or some of the other videos, how do you then redirect yourself into a way that, you may find yourself in a bit of a dark spot for a bit, but then how do you reframe it and then course correct as quickly as possible? Like, everybody goes there. Everybody has tough times. Everybody has rough days. But what do you do to ensure that you're getting the right sleep, to minimize that and make sure that when things do come your way, how do you reframe them and then course correct? So that's some of the other stuff that we talked about that I found helpful.
And I think you mentioned there's the structural component, and a lot of business owners, business leaders will get that. It's like you have to have a plan in place. And we do this all the time in business, right? We put in place an annual plan, a quarterly plan, a monthly plan, but we don't take the time because of competing time commitments to do this on a personal level. At least a lot of us don't. So yes, part of it is about, as you say, having the structured outer game sorted. Like, what does my weekly plan at the most micro level look like? Or even like daily plan, what does that look like? But then it's like, how do you sort out the inner game? Because, if we just take weight loss as one example, right? So health and weight loss is one pillar of performance. Anyone can lose weight. That's not really the hard part. The hard part is just losing the weight and keeping it off, right? It's actually showing up and having a system in place that works for you with your unique challenges, right? So for you, it's like, how do you keep the weight off and not just lose 3, 4, 5 pounds and then put it back on? How do you keep the weight off for the long term? And I think that only comes from, as you say, like putting in place the structure, the routine, the habits, the rituals, the tried and tested things that are actually going to work for you per se. Like, is there anything that you do now that you didn't do before that you'd say, like, this is actually, I can hang my hat, like that's a fundamental difference in what I do today than what I was trying to do?
Sure. Yeah, there's a few things. One, when I look at the different routines that I do at the gym now, before I would go to the gym and I had my own just regular routine that was kind of rigorous, but let's just say it wasn't as thoughtful. I had that regular, okay, today I'm going to work on legs, and today I'm going to work on arms, or this time I'm going to do chest. And really were relatively short workouts that had a little bit of a warm up, some stretching, and it was okay, but it really wasn't doing for me when I look back, I thought I was doing the right thing, and I really wasn't doing as close to the right thing as I probably should. And before, years back, I could run distances, and I have some back issues now, so I could probably run now, but I think it's just a bit of a risk. I do other things now. I swim and I bike, but with the different routines that we went through, what I can do now is I have a really nice warm up that I can do, and it doesn't take a lot. Like, I can do my entire workout now with a jump rope and with 2 15-pound dumbbells. I can do everything that I need to with that, because I can do a really good core exercise, and I could use those dumbbells to do all the different exercises, whether it's the goblet, lunges, or other lunges, and some of the other the workouts that we do. So right now, when I go to the gym, regardless of the quality of the gym, I can get a good 30, 40, 50-minute workout and walk away feeling like, hey, I really just had a nice exercise session. And with the routines that you provided, and what we went through, really gave me a more holistic workout. Like, instead of doing those segments like we talked about, when I go to the gym now, I may focus on one area, but I always get like a full body workout. I may do a core one day, but when I do that core, I always do something that's with the rest as well. So when I show up for a workout, I tend to put more into it, and I tend to work out longer. I tend to enjoy it more. And then I walk away feeling, it's almost like you think about a good meal, and I walk away feeling like, all right, I just had a really nice, satisfying meal. And when I look at my workout now, each time I leave the gym with the different routines that have been put into place, I feel satisfied that I've had a really good workout, and can look back on it and say I really made a difference. And it makes me enjoy the workout more. It's not working. It's really just an enjoyable time. And when I do that, I walk away feeling satisfied that I really put the effort into it, and it keeps me doing it, and it keeps my fitness up, but it also helps me keep my weight in check. And kind of like what we talked about before about the other choices that you make with travel and all. And all right, like last night, I went out and was working with a colleague, and we went to have Mexican, which is probably, one of the worst choices that we could make, especially with what I ordered. But at least every time I make a choice like that, I think, okay, what am I going to do for the rest of the week when I do this? So it kind of reframes the choices that I make, and it allows me to, all right, I'm going to enjoy this, but I'm also going to make sure that when I enjoy this, I'm going to do these other things to kind of qualify it to keep everything else in check. So that's really a lot of the difference that it's made for me. And those are some of the changes that I've made to make this sustainable. And then when I travel, it's the same thing. When I go to a restaurant, I'll be critical about, or I'll look critically at the restaurant that we go to, about what's on the menu, and just make qualified choices. Like, what am I going to eat today? What is the time zone that I'm in? When am I going to end up going to bed, and what time do I wake up tomorrow? Because if I'm traveling across 3 time zones and I'm going to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm from the East Coast and I go to the West Coast, how late am I going to be up this night? How can I then balance that the next day? Kind of like another thing we talked about. If you have a couple of drinks, you're really just kind of stealing from the next day if you're not going to get good sleep. So, and we all make those choices, but the way I make those choices now are just very different. I'll balance it with, okay, I may pay Peter, but I'm going to take from Paul's pocket here. But I also know that there's consequences to this choice, and it's not that I can't do it, but I've just got to then adjust for it from another place. And as long as I keep doing those things, I can make these choices and keep that balance.
So you're talking about there kind of 2 fundamental systems that we use, right? So one is the anytime, anywhere framework, which is based on wherever you are in the country, in the world, like whatever environment you're in, you have access to different programs that are specific to your goals, right? So you now have access to, programs for whether you're traveling, programs for your home at the gym, programs specific to like a challenge. So, you competed in a duathlon, right, recently.
Yeah.
But also then, from a nutrition standpoint, people hate diets. And I don't believe in them because it's like, what happens after the diet, right? You go back to what the normal was. So you actually, touched on what we call conscious consistency, which is making informed decisions on what you want to eat, how you want to eat, when you want to eat. And over time, trying to move that predominantly towards a healthier way of eating or a healthier way of living. Doesn't mean that you can't go out for Mexican and enjoy yourself. It just means that you've rewired your thought process so that you're more consciously aware to it. And that has meant that, for the last 6 months, for example, when you lost the weight, you lost like 20 odd pounds, it's like you've managed to keep that off, right, for 6 months. And I didn't have to do a lot in that space. It's like you did all the work because you'd invested that time and energy up front in our first 3 months working together. If we look at like when we did Reignite, right, which is probably like 6 months ago now, what's the biggest takeaway from your perspective? Like, what's the like, if you had to put your hand on one thing, it's like this is the big takeaway from the program. What would that be?
What you just described on the conscious consistency, because I agree with you, because I've done diets over the years and people have done the Atkins diet and things like that, but the development of the new habits and the consistency and making those choices has been the big takeaway for me. I watch what I keep around the house. If I make a choice to, have a meal like I did last night, I just make sure that each one of those choices that I make, there's a trade-off one way or the other. That's probably the biggest thing, just to develop those habits and just think critically about the choices that I'm making. And it's also the same thing with sleep, but it's just making sure that I'm looking at those things through the lens of how is this going to affect me physically? What is the long-term, implication if I make this choice, like a poor choice, or let's just say one of those choices, and that becomes like a new pattern. It's just important to think about what is it that you're like, is this a one-time choice that I'm making, or am I going to go down a wrong path? And you just need to be conscious of that, because losing the weight is one thing. Keeping it off can be a bit of a challenge. And that's why it's important to develop the habits like what you described, because then it's not hard to keep it off. And you also just check yourself to make sure that you maintain kind of a healthy mindset. And just,
how important do you think that is? So, like, this is just my view, right? But programs that I've done in the past, or other programs that I've experienced and heard people talk about, is one of the common themes that comes up is there's not enough accountability on the program. And then you're not taught self-accountability for after the program finishes. So if those are like the two biggest issues, it's like, I said to you at the beginning, I'm going to do one or two things. I'm either here to metaphorically put my arm around you and say, look, you need to stop beating yourself up. Or if you commit to something, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire because you said you would. And, there's times in the over the last 9 months that I've done both, right? But like, what's your view on, those are my words. What's your view on accountability? Like, how important is that?
Well, mostly, I guess, accountability to yourself. When I show up each morning, am I doing the right things? And accountability is one thing. You got to have that. And then as I kind of reflect on this, it's also a matter of, like when we had our discussions each week, it's a matter of, all right, just being consistent and then being patient and just sticking with it, knowing that if you keep doing those right things, you're going to get the results. And I think I can't say it ever got frustrating, just because when we first started, hitting that send button and getting things kicked off, I felt really good because to your point earlier, felt like, all right, I made an investment in myself. But then we started working. You didn't put me on like a crash diet. You sent me some recipes and some thoughts of things I can do. We took the pictures of the food, and then instead of going, okay, you got to just change everything up. It wasn't a dramatic change. It was, okay, let's kind of tweak things here and there. Let's kind of get your, get you in the right exercise mindset, and let's get your body going in the right direction. So it was probably about, what you think, about a month or so before we really kind of started picking up the pace. And then it was about 6 weeks, I guess, because I sent you that screenshot from my phone where I was putting everything on my Apple, and then it just kind of started really just kind of going down, and it just kind of kept on going down pretty fast after about 6 weeks. But it took about a month before it even started to dip. And then it was, I think, the last 3 weeks or so that I was like, okay, how can we accelerate this? And so I guess my point is that the accountability is important, but it's also when we have these conversations, and it was just, okay, let's just stick with it. Yeah, things are going to come. You just keep doing. So accountability, just to keep doing it, knowing that you have somebody that's kind of coaching you through, and before you beat yourself up, somebody else is saying from an outside perspective, you know what, we're doing all the right things. The results are going to happen. Let's just keep on doing this. And if you stick with it, and then the next thing you know, like I said, about 6 weeks later, it really started kicking in. And then it started to get more exciting, because then I started seeing the results. And every week after that, it seemed like there was about another 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds that came off. And then we hit that August time frame. And then I felt like I was going to get down to one level. And I remember you saying, yeah, I think you can do more than that. And so I wasn't giving myself enough credit for what I thought I could do, and actually just kind of even exceeded the goals that I originally set out to achieve. So, yeah, accountability is important to yourself, but then having somebody kind of work with you on when you're having a tough time, making sure that you're just consistent and you just stick with it, and somebody kind of coaches you through the times where you're feeling like you're not getting the results that you like.
I love that, and I'm a believer in systems, right, and structures, and making things easier, repeatable patterns of behavior. So we almost flip things on our heads, like in this program, and that most people go on like a fitness program to maybe lose weight or get in shape, and they would try and change everything all at once, and that might work for 3-4 weeks, but then after that, it's like you haven't conditioned the thought processes or the emotional processes to deal with that level of change. So what happens? You don't rise to the level of your dreams, you fall to the level of your habits. So 95% of people go back to doing what they've always done. It's like you
Mhm.
did the opposite in terms of like just put in place the small wins to start with, right? The small micro changes, build a foundation, and then once you've got that foundation in place, then you start to accelerate through. And
Mhm.
yeah, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like 6 months later, and you're starting to like not only see new results, but it's like the results that you achieved in the first 3 months have stayed there, right? But
Yeah.
we also went through and we did some further work after Reignite, right? We did Elevate, and we started to broaden out a little bit some of the focus, away from just health and fitness per se,
Mhm.
into a little bit into like connection, relationship building, a little bit further into mindset and self-development. Well, like again, if you cast your mind back, like what inspired you to like take further action and say like, look, I think getting a coach is the right thing to do in terms of these broader, more holistic aspects of performance.
Mhm. Well, the first experience, really did work well, and I wanted to ensure that that was sustainable. So I really wanted to continue a program, and I was thinking about where I was going to go down the road. Um, and after we talked about what the next program would entail, I did feel like, okay, this is something that I'd like to continue as a journey. So really, it was just wanting to kind of pick up from where we left off, and then we talked about some of the mechanics of things that I would entertain down the road, um, and really wanted to have kind of an outside coach that would help maintain the fitness consistency, build upon what we had already done, and then maybe operationalize some of the stuff that we talked about in concepts during Reignite, and then have somebody that could kind of coach me through being able to put the right things in place. And I kind of felt like I knew many of the things that I wanted to do, but I kind of wanted somebody from the outside to, again, going back to accountability, ensure that I was going to follow through on these thoughts, not let them just be fleeting thoughts, let them be things that, okay, these are goals that I really want to achieve, and then just get them down on paper or electronic paper, let's say, and and then just have something that I can have as kind of a roadmap for where I was going to go with some next steps. And that really wanted to just ensure that I was holding myself accountable to some of the goals that I had, and then having somebody work with me that maybe not tell me what to do, but to say, all right, so if that's your goal, how do you want to then document your goal? What time frame for which are you going to achieve this goal? What are the metrics around how you're going to measure the success towards your goal? And let's now write it down, and now you have something to go back and revisit to make sure that you're on track.
And this program, Elevate in particular, we touched on this a bit in Reignite, but Elevate in particular, um, we start to broaden out your performance, as I said, and
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to look at some of the more quantifiable things like weight loss and put like you can put a number on it. But if you look at some of the mindset shifts over the last 9 months, like what's actually changed in terms of like the way in which you perhaps think, like the inner dialogue that you have with yourself, like what's actually changed there? Has anything changed from your perspective?
Well, the big thing is just making sure that the choices I make, I think about, okay, what's the impact on my physical health? How is it going to impact how I show up? And then what's the impact on my fitness? Those types of things. So that's really the big thing. I just ensure that going back to the earlier part of our conversation, that the choices that are made, I look at them holistically, and just um, try to take a thoughtful approach to the choices that I do make. Again, going back to just what's the food that I keep around the house? What is it that I ensure that if I'm going to travel this week in this place, how do I ensure that I'm going to be in a position that I can make the choices that I'd like to make? Well, how is this going to impact me with my team if I don't get enough sleep? And then if something does come up, that maybe puts me in a direction I need to course correct, what are my tools for doing that? So really, it just, the big takeaway for me is just ensuring that I'm showing up the best that I can show up, mentally, physically, and then just realizing that if there is a tough day, it's just, how do I then recover from that? And then um, what do I do going forward? And realize that I have tools um, to ensure that I can get on track. So, I mean, like my weights come up just a little bit, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think actually I could have actually put on a little bit of muscle weight because I can lift as much as I could. I can do more pull-ups than I could before. Um, but I've only put on, like, the fact that I'm up like about 2.5, 3 pounds, and I'm looking at that and I'm measuring that, and I've kind of leveled out. Um, um, Now I know that there's different levers that I can pull if I want to, dip back down, or I want to maintain a level of consistency. Um, you know, it just has given me these different means of making these types of choices. But my mindset is more just realizing that there's all these different trade-offs, and then how do I ensure that I can show up the best that I want to, or the best that I'd like.
So I guess, a lot of that I talk about, like raising your standards, right? And sometimes I might even say like raising your standards to a level that no one else would think's acceptable. Like maybe it's just like showing up consistently, mentally and physically, like to the best of your ability, which, from what you're talking about is where you're at now. It's like you're the best version of you that you could possibly be at this given age. Doesn't mean that you have to necessarily be able to do things that you could do when you're 20, right? But it's like
Sure.
this version of you is the best version of you possible, right?
Sure.
Like we can wrap up in just a second because I'm conscious of time. But one of the things that a lot of people, that want to get help or want to get fitter, want to get healthier, want to perform better at work, whether it means kind of better energy, more confidence dealing with imposter syndrome, or even like actually like just stop letting deals go through their fingers and lose money, for example. Like one of the things that they'll often say is like, I don't have time to do that. Like what would you say to people that are like, oh, I don't have time to invest in myself, or I don't have time to invest in my health? Like what advice would you give those guys?
Well, you really do have to find time to invest in yourself and in your health, because if you don't, then all these other things are going to suffer anyway. So, I mean, it is really a matter of choice and making sure you can carve out the time. I mean, time is at a premium now. I'm working harder now than I have in a long time, but I'm still finding my way to get some time for fitness. And so I would say that if you really think about it, it may be hard at first, but it's a matter of just developing the habit. So if you have to put a time frame around it, I'd say, okay, if you can stick with it for 30 days, try to find that time period where you can do it. And then once you do it, you'll be thankful that you did, because then you'll realize that you wish you would have done it sooner, because then you start getting time back, because then you start showing up with more energy, and you feel better about yourself because you do feel like you're more fit. And the time is there. You just kind of have to look, and like you and I went through the calendar multiple times. I've still got the Excel sheet that we put together. So you do have to take the time to look at your calendar top to bottom, and then just, look at it critically and just go, okay, where can I find the time to do these things? Because you'll find the time. There's a way to do it. It's just a matter of just taking a few minutes, sitting, and that's where an outside perspective can help, because you can kind of outsource that piece and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, and then somebody from the outside can look at it and say, can you adjust here, here, and here, or this is how I do it, and then start applying it, and then you'll realize, okay, I can I can find the time to make this happen. And then once you find the time to do it, you'll find more time, because then you do tend to do the things that you enjoy.
Mhm.
And when you start enjoying it is when you'll make sure that you find the time. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I hate going to the gym." That's what they think if they think about a diet. And like you watch the diet commercials or these other things, you see them all the time. You don't want to spend 30, 40 or minutes or an hour in the gym each day, do you? I'm like, well, you know what? When you enjoy it and you see the results from it, you will find the time to do it, because once you start doing it and you do find that, hey, this is kind of an enjoyable thing, and you're seeing the results from it, then mentally you start kind of finding the time for it. So if that's what you truly want to do, then make that time investment to just kind of prime the pump to get it going. And then you'll realize that once you prime that pump and you start seeing the results, you'll start finding the time to do the things that are going to help you show up.
I think it's an awesome insight. Like, I guess in closing, what would your thoughts be, or your advice maybe even be, like, to those people that are thinking about getting help, thinking about getting a coach to help them with a specific area, maybe their performance? Like, when would you actually go and get outside help? And, maybe when wouldn't you? Who's a coach for, who's it not for?
I mean, first, I think a coach is for anybody. If you don't have an outside perspective to help you achieve your goals, I mean, having an outside, I mean, maybe you have friends that can help you with that, but maybe you just want somebody from the outside that you can talk to that really has no personal stake with you. But if you have certain goals that you want to achieve and you want to have an outside perspective, it's great to have friends. Friends are going to give you their perspective, but they're also going to be with you for the long term in different capacities. But when you go to a coach, you're kind of outsourcing and saying, okay, I want to achieve these goals. And this person has no investment except to say they want to achieve the results. Because then, in all honesty, when you have a clientele, you want to be able to look back and say, these are the results that I achieved. So if you have certain goals that you want to achieve and you've been working towards them and you just want to accelerate them, I would say that is where you need a coach, because you need somebody that's just going to not tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you what you need to hear to move towards what it is that you want to achieve. If you're fine with what you're doing, you're achieving everything that you'd like, and you feel fine, then that may not be for you. But if you're wanting to move in a certain direction, whether it's with your business goals or your fitness goals, then having that outside perspective that is just going to be completely honest with you, then that is, in my view, where I think a coach comes in.
Awesome. And I love that reflection, right? Like, guaranteeing your success and accelerating your results. Like, that's when a coach can help. So look, Tom, I want to say thank you for your time today, just coming on and sharing your wisdom, your reflections on the last 9 months that we've spent together. Hopefully, for anyone that's watching live or on replay, this has been useful for you. You've got some takeaways just based on Tom's experience. And look, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and I'll make sure that I circle back around and answer any of them this week. So look, thank you guys for tuning in and watching, and everyone, please stay safe, and I'll see you on the next live. Take care.
Thank you all.